My trip to South Georgia, the Falkland Islands and Argentina began on the 25th of January with a train ride from Scotland to London, a flight from Heathrow to Sao Paulo, and then from Sao Paulo across the Andes to arrive in Chile on the 27th of January. The journey from Santiago via Punta Arenas to Mount Pleasant in the Falklands was a lovely journey. First of all, we had an early morning departure from Santiago, which meant we saw sunrise over all the mountains in the aeroplane, and then we flew over the Andes and witnessed and saw the absolutely fantastic mountains and the rocks underneath us. I found it particularly amazing to watch the clouds floating below us, and also to see the mountains peaking themselves below the clouds. The whole thing was just absolutely fantastic. We had to get off at Punta Arenas and get our passport stamped in order that we could enter another country, i.e. the Falklands. That was really easy to do, and it just involved getting off the plane and sort of going through passport control for a short time. The journey into Mount Pleasant was absolutely fantastic. I don't know exactly how many islands there are in the Falklands. I know some are inhabited, some are not, but what I do know is that just witnessing the land from the air was fantastic, and it was particularly nice for me to arrive at Mount Pleasant Airport knowing that this was the beginning of my adventure to South Georgia. We boarded our ship, the academic Sergei Vavilov, after a short sightseeing trip in Stanley. We boarded about 4 o'clock, and the first thing we did was all the usual preparation, initial boarding things like finding our cabins, seeing who we were sharing with. I was sharing a tiny cabin with a woman called Teresa Moorhead, but it worked out just quite well. We were then quite quickly able to set sail, and as you can see, our first experience of leaving Stanley Harbour, the lights, the sky, everything was just really amazing. I was standing on the front of the ship and just looking out over the harbour as we were passing. The captain showed the British flag on his ship, even although he is Russian, and the trip is actually organised by a Canadian company. I think that was because he wanted to show respect for the fact that the Falkland Islands think of themselves as British. Shortly after we boarded and set sail, we had to undergo a security and briefing and also lifeboat drill, and we all had to don our life jackets and make our way down to the lifeboat station. And then we were introduced to the Zodiacs, which was going to be a major feature of the rest of the journey, helping us to get from ship to shore and back again. The beauty of the sky that we encountered when we were leaving Stanley Port was more than matched that evening with an absolutely incredible sunset, our first of several that we saw on board the ship. One of the things that would happen would be that we would be called out to the bridge of the bow if there was something spectacular to see, and sunsets were one of the things that we would quite frequently be exhorted to go and witness as we were sailing along and as the journey progressed. It was absolutely fantastic to witness. When I went to Antarctica on November 15, the only way you could get there was by 2 days on board a ship, across the Drake Passage, one of the most difficult seas in the world. Now I think you can actually fly to Antarctica, not so South Georgia. South Georgia still requires 2 days on board a ship, and while the seas were not as rough as in Antarctica, you can see from the video that they were quite interesting. You might think 2 days on board ship were just really a means to an end and were quite boring. In fact, this is not the case. We were constantly being invited to attend presentations to hear about the history of South Georgia, Shackleton, the wildlife we might anticipate seeing there, and also to talk about the bird life that followed the ship. And we were quite frequently called up to the bridge or other parts of the ship to see giant albatrosses, petrels, whale blows, etc. Because we had ornithologists and various experts on whales and all the different mammals, they were able to point out lots of things too, so the actual journey itself was incredibly exciting and informative, and actually added to the experience of going to South Georgia. After 1.5 days we reached land. Well, we actually saw land. These rocks called Shag Rock, they're still about half a day from South Georgia. And lastly, you'll see some pictures of the birds that we saw, not taken by me because I don't have the talent for that, but pinched from other travellers. After another half day of sailing, we finally, with great excitement, sighted South Georgia. It was just an absolutely amazing sight, but it was not possible for us to land. You can see from the swell of the sea, it was just impossible to get the Zodiacs out. Zodiacs can only operate in about 25 miles an hour, and it was way above that. However, it was amazing to see the glacier. We went to Stromness Bay and Leith Harbour. Stromness Bay and Leith Harbour are both former whaling stations. Stromness Bay is also famous for the fact that that was the whaling station Ernest Shackleton and his pals arrived at on their epic journey from Antarctica to rescue their men once their ship had got crushed by ice. It's not possible to visit any of the whaling stations apart from the ones existing, and that is because, for 2 reasons. One is that the buildings are so unsafe and unstable, it would be dangerous to be near them, and also asbestos was used largely in the whaling industry, and a lot of the buildings that are still there linked with the whaling industry have got asbestos in them, and they would be absolutely totally unsafe. Although it wasn't possible to land, I just loved being able to stand out with the wind in my hair and watching the first seals and the penguins in the water for the first time close up, and also to see the whaling station at Leith Harbour. An amazing start to my South Georgia experience. We finally set foot with great excitement on South Georgia at Jason Harbour. Jason Harbour is a bay 1 mile wide lying west of Allen Bay in the north side of Cumberland West Bay in South Georgia. It was charted and named by the Swedish Antarctica expedition of 1901-4 under Otto Nordenskjöld. I'm not really quite sure how you pronounce that, but that's probably good enough. First seals were the first animal that we saw on landing, and you could see them playing on the edge of the water, swimming through the water, porpoising through the water, which was really lovely to watch, and basically just wandering around. The baby fur seals in particular look incredibly cute, but we were advised that in fact they can be quite vicious, and in fact a year ago approximately, one man who was on a one ocean trip that I was on, like the one that I was on, got bitten by a fur seal within 20 minutes of landing, putting his first step on South Georgia, and had to be rushed back to the mainland for hospital treatment, because where he was bitten was quite life-threatening. In fact, I had a couple of people on board the ship that we were on who had been part of that and who said, oh, we visited South Georgia but for only 20 minutes. The other big thing were penguins, and king penguins in particular. There are different species of penguins on South Georgia, more of that later, but the king penguins were the ones that we saw most of and that we certainly saw on Jason Harbour, and they were just quite incredibly cute, as all penguins are, wandering around, waddling around, and basically totally unconcerned about the fact that they had visitors staring at them and taking photographs of them. What I found was particularly amazing in view of Antarctica, where the only place I saw penguins was on ice and snow. These penguins, because it was South Georgia's summer and there's not snow around, were wandering around on the beaches of stones and on grass and up mountains, etc. The other one was elephant seals. Elephant seals are huge but really basically incredibly boring. You spend absolutely ages watching for these elephant seals to do something, and the most exciting thing is when they yawn, and that makes you feel really quite happy that you've actually managed to get a picture of an elephant seal yawning. Birds were quite big features on Jason Harbour, and the birds are basically their scavengers. There's scows and petrels and albatross, and they will eat dead penguins. I also took quite a lot of pleasure in taking photographs of bones, etc. Not really sure why. You're not allowed to actually remove anything from South Georgia, but you are allowed to take pictures. And then after 3 hours we got back on the Zodiacs and we returned to the ship for lunch. This afternoon we went into Cumberland Bay to see the Nordensky Glacier. Although we didn't land, the sight of the glacier was amazing from the ship. Although glaciers look like a solid mass, in fact they're constantly moving as moisture, water, snow, etc. accumulates in the top. It creates pressure on the glacier and creates almost like a sort of conveyor impact of ice moving around the glacier, so it's constantly on the move, and quite often you'll see great chunks of the glacier just breaking off and landing in the sea, and those form icebergs. I didn't see any today, but I've seen it before, particularly in the Krita Glacier, which people quite frequently visit when they're visiting Antarctica as a pre-thing. It's in Argentina, and that's a fabulous sight to see. Well, what to say about Salisbury Plain? As you can see, it had an absolutely fantastic landscape. As with all South Georgia, it was incredibly mountainous and a lot of snow. There were some fur seals, both of the baby and cute variety and also of the more adult variety. However, what really stood out in Salisbury Plain were the penguins. Penguins as far as the eye could see. There was a massive colony of penguins, something in the region of about 250,000 of them, including baby penguins, which are brown, maybe not quite as magnificent as the kings in all their glorious colour. Those little brown nondescript penguins will one day become king penguins that you can see walking about. There were also penguins in their molting frame of mind, and as you can see from this picture, basically the penguins extended not only beside as far as I can see, but also way up the hill almost as far as the bottom of the mountain. It was such an incredible sight to see. I just stood and gazed in absolute total awe of the spectacle in front of me. And obviously everybody else was there. This is David and his wife. One is a photographer, the other one is a painter, and they paint penguins for a living basically, and they were just awestruck with this site, although they'd actually been here quite a few times, as well as the penguins in their multitudes. There was also penguins in more singular or small groups, just being cute. The previous penguins that you saw were molting, and when penguins molt, they come on shore and they don't go back into the sea for 3 or 4 weeks because they're not waterproof when they're in the molting stage. So you have to be quite careful whenever you're around them, because you really don't want to give them any upset or cause them to do anything that would mean that they would lose any sort of energy, because they need to save all their food supplies in order to be able to survive for 4 weeks without being fed, and the energy it takes to mold and to rebuild a new skin, I guess. And then we had the birds. These little cute chicks grow up into these big birds who are basically eat dead penguins. So turn your head away if you don't really want to see life as it actually is at this sort of place where you actually have to sometimes kill to survive. Our afternoon excursion was to Pine Island. There were 2 excursions in Pine Island. I first of all went to visit Pine Island itself and started off by meeting some very cute fur seals bouncing around in the tussock grass. The tussock grass is really important in South Georgia because it's the main vegetation on the island, and also is the nesting ground for most of the birds in South Georgia. This cute little guy was bouncing around on the one and only boardwalk that there is in the whole of South Georgia. However, the main purpose of going to South Georgia is to visit nesting albatross, and you can see and visit a nest very, very close up to the boardwalk. I should maybe say something about the bird life on South Georgia. There are a number of different bird species on South Georgia, but during the whaling and sealing seasons or times, the bird life was decimated. There are no trees in South Georgia, so all of the birds are ground nesting. So when there were rats and mice who ate and destroyed the eggs, then the bird life just perished and was absolutely decimated. Something like about 70% of the bird life in South Georgia that was ground nesting disappeared. There's been a very successful rat eradication and mice eradication program, which has actually led to the reintroduction of the birds, in particular one which everybody is very excited about, which is this little fellow here, which is the South Georgia pipit. It's the only songbird in South Georgia, and it was almost extinct until the successful rat program came. And then on the way back, which was quite a nice introduction to my second excursion around Pine Island, was meeting these fur seals swimming around in the water and being just basically quite incredibly cute and nice. As I've said, they can be quite dangerous if you get close to them because they can bite, but watching them from a distance, you just have to be amused by them. The second part of the Prime Island adventure was to take a Zodiac cruise around part of the coastline, and I took a lot of pleasure using my GoPro to film the kelp above and below water, and I also watched it. I think the kelp was absolutely beautiful. I saw a single salted krill, the major food source of fur seals and whales, and I really enjoyed watching this wee guy sort of clambering up the cliff to meet his mates. And then finally I had a lot of pleasure watching this bird sort of ducking, diving, having a bath, whatever he was doing in the water. He just looked as though he was really enjoying himself, and I had a great afternoon as well.
But when you are seeing no hope, when you can see no way forward, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton. So let's toast the boss. The boss.
Grytviken, the birthplace of where Shackleton began his fantastic trip to Antarctica, well, ill-fated really. His grave's there. The Grytviken's also the place where whaling was started in South Georgia. It's also the only place where there's any population in South Georgia, 13 people rising to 20 during the summer season. It's the only shop, it's the only museum, it's the only, more or less, kind of any sign of sort of human habitation really in Grytviken, and it was an amazing spectacle to see the church alongside of all the detritus from the whaling, and to have a look around the museum and learn the story of Shackleton. We also went to a wedding in South Georgia, which was amazing. One of the crew wanted to get married in South Georgia because she'd lived there for 14 years, and that was really a nice thing to see as well.
By the powers invested in me by His Excellency the Commissioner for South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands, I now renounce you to be husband and wife.
After a fantastic morning in Grytviken and lunch on board the ship, we headed towards St Andrews Bay. It was absolutely fantastic to see the fur seals kind of beckoning us and guiding us in the water towards St Andrews Bay, and I thoroughly enjoyed just watching all their antics. As with most of South Georgia, St Andrews Bay is an absolutely beautiful mountainous glacial environment. There were very few fur seals on St Andrews Bay, although we'd seen lots, as you can see, before in the water. But of course we had the usual penguin parade, and this was really the highlight of the trip to St Andrews Bay, watching the penguins in various habitats on the shore, but also further inland, as you have seen, just sort of walking about, being cute and cuddly. And here you can see how unconcerned the penguins were by us being there by our presence. This penguin, totally oblivious to the fact that I'm standing there, as you can see my shadow holding my GoPro, filming him, just sort of walked down towards me and past me without a care in the world. That was typical of penguin behaviour. We left St Andrews Bay around sunset, which allowed us to have this beautiful view of the sun shining on the water and in the glacier behind. And then in the evening we had a barbecue on board and continued the wedding theme by having wedding cake. We remained overnight in St Andrews Bay in order to have the opportunity of seeing sunrise over the bay. We were called at 5:30 in the morning and quickly got ourselves ready to go out onto St Andrews Bay, with the plan being to return to the ship for breakfast after we had seen the sunrise, which was absolutely fantastically magnificent. St Andrews Bay is famous for its king penguin colony. It has about 100,000 breeding pairs, and it's colonised the whole year round because of the breeding patterns of the king penguins. I just found the whole thing completely fantastic. The colours were just amazing, and of course the penguins, as always, were just incredibly cute and just endlessly amusing. Early in the morning there were large numbers of penguins coming into land basically. My guess is they've been out feeding all night and they were coming into land to rest and to look after their babies, and it was just absolutely fantastic to watch them both swimming in the water and then landing and putting their first little feet on land and sort of kind of shaking out their wings, etc. The colours, as you can see, were just fantastic to film and to watch, and I think I've got some really nice photographs of penguins in the water and out the water, particularly like that one. Very curious about what's happening. As well as seeing them in the water, there was much fun to be had just watching them waddling around, more or less completely unconcerned by us in red jackets filming them and taking photographs of them. Throughout the whole trip, just the penguins got on with their daily business, just basically suiting themselves, which was really good because it shows that the impact of tourism on the penguin population is really minimal, if non-existent. And then we came to the ridiculous spectacles of penguins basically tripping themselves up on the rope that was there to try to tie the zodiacs down. I might be a bit nasty or something like that, but I actually thoroughly enjoyed watching the antics of them, with them falling, tripping up. It was just really, really funny, and I just could not stop laughing. Cruel maybe, but really, really funny nonetheless. What I think it also showed was the penguins' absolute determination to go where they wanted to go, and nothing was actually going to get in their way, in the way of them actually achieving their objectives. So us, ropes, nothing got in the way. And you've probably seen lots of white stuff. That's actually penguin fur, because this is the time of year when they're actually molting, and when they're molting they have to stay on land for 4 weeks. They're not waterproof at that point, so they have to stay on land and they just molt, and there was all this kind of white fluffy stuff all over the bay, testament to the number of penguins there actually are. These penguins, I think, somehow seem to have got it, and they're turning away from the rope. And of course there were the fur seals in evidence. Not so many as in other places, but fur seals there nonetheless. And it was really interesting to see them fighting among themselves. This is like play fighting that the fur seals do, and it's to help them practice when they're actually doing their sort of mating rituals. I just speeded this up so you could see how funny it was. And again, the fur seals play fighting just now. The stronger of the fur seals get the female, basically, so they practice that as teenagers before they reach adulthood and maturity. And we got a sight of an elephant seal emerging from the water. Elephant seals, I think I've said before, just are fairly boring, so this one was quite amusing actually, as it made its way up onto the beach. But I think something happened and it decided to turn back for some reason and go back out to sea, which is, I'm not really sure why. And then we said goodbye to St Andrews Bay and returned to the ship for breakfast. Royal Bay was named and discovered by a British expedition under James Cook in 1775. Our visit to Royal Bay was by a Zodiac cruise. I think I've said in the past that Zodiacs can really only operate in relatively calm waters, and this was probably about the sort of limit of their capability. The day that we went out onto Royal Bay, it was a bit rocky, but it was actually really interesting. I was particularly interested in seeing the icebergs. We didn't see many of those in South Georgia, particularly at that time of year, but it was really nice because it was reminiscent of my trip to Antarctica some 15 months or so before, and I love the shapes of the icebergs and the blue tinging colour to them. At previous sites we had primarily seen king penguins and gentoos. Today we saw macaroni penguins. Initially we saw, well, you'll see it, you saw a video of them coming down off the mountains, but in fact their primary habitat is rocks, and this was amazing to see them sliding down these rocks. I loved the orange sort of head of hair that they had. It made them particularly cute looking. However, these birds are probably not that cute because they are very aggressive and territorial, I think with each other rather than with human beings, and often during the beginnings of the mating season you will see males fighting for territory and fighting to gain ascendancy over the females. I loved just watching them sort of ducking and diving, jumping off the rocks and running around the rocks. They were just really amazing, and I thoroughly enjoyed the time that I had with them. It was a bit difficult to take film of the penguins. Being on a boat that's bouncing about in the water just does not allow you to find an opportunity to create a stable video, so I hope you bear with the sort of bounciness of the video and enjoy it nonetheless. Gold Harbour is home to king penguins, gentoo and elephant seals, although there are also a large number of fur seals on that part of the island as there are everywhere else. I had a really lovely time in Gold Harbour photographing the various penguins and also the elephant seals, as did all the other people on the trip who were there photographing things as well. There are also giant petrels on that part of the beach, and what I quite liked, particularly liked, was the fact that all of these animals seem to coexist together and get on reasonably well. which was just really nice to see. What we also saw quite a lot of were molting penguins, and I think I've explained before that penguins arrive from sea and can't go back out again for 4 weeks during the period that they're molting because they're not waterproof. So we saw quite a few of those, and we saw a number of baby penguins, which again were just really lovely, and so it was just a great afternoon to be there. The elephant seals were also molting and were doing their usual kind of lying around doing not very much. However, they were also doing some of the practice fighting that I talked about before. Practice fighting that helps them when they're at an age and maturity to be involved in mating. We stayed in Gold Harbour overnight in the hope that in the morning we would see the mountains turned to gold by the sunrise. Unfortunately that wasn't possible because it was a bit cloudy, but apparently Gold Harbour gets its name because on nice days the mountains turn to gold. Dragalski Ford was charted by the Second German Antarctic Expedition in 1911 and named after Professor Erich van Dragalski, the leader of the first German Antarctic expedition in 1901-03. For me, the main attraction was not just the beautiful mountains but also the birds, and I have to say that we did 3 expeditions in the one day, and I think I got a bit confused about the photographs. So some of the glacier photographs I think belong elsewhere, but I couldn't really be bothered changing them. Larsen Harbour is a branch of Dragalski Ford. It was named after Carl Larsen, who is the founder of whaling and also of Grytviken. And I think some of the iceberg photographs that you saw before should actually have been here, because I think those are details of that particular iceberg. I really enjoyed visiting this particular part. I loved watching the penguins kind of ducking and diving in the water, and also seeing them on the rocks, which really quite amazed me. These particular penguins, these are chinstraps, and you can see why, because they've got the little sort of the kind of line under their chins. I've seen those in Antarctica, but this I think was the first time I saw them in South Georgia, so that was really nice because I'm always interested in penguins. Cooper Island is a tiny island. It's only 2 miles long, and it is between Dragalski Fjord and Larsen Harbour. It was named by James Cook in 1775, who discovered it, and it was named after an officer on board the ship. It's the home of loads of penguins and absolutely fantastic scenery, and I really enjoyed going on the Zodiac cruise that allowed us to see all the scenery, to look at the penguins ducking and diving in the water, etc. I also took quite a lot of pleasure observing and also photographing the kelp that surrounded parts of the island, and I actually also really enjoyed watching the video that I took of the kelp underwater and the movements, and I think that is really particularly nice. Tuna Bay was the last landing spot we had on South Georgia, and it was a lovely place to end the trip. As far as sort of walking on South Georgia is concerned, we saw a vast number of penguins, baby penguins, king penguins, molting penguins, penguins singular, penguins plural, penguins en masse, and I just absolutely loved taking photographs of the penguins doing all sorts of cute and lovely things, and I hope you enjoy the photographs I've taken. Please don't think this is the last of the penguin photographs or videos of this holiday, because I still have the Falklands and Argentina. There are no penguins in Argentina, but certainly there were quite a few in the Falklands to take. But in terms of South Georgia, this was just a fantastic place to end the trip, or to end actual landing on South Georgia, because we just saw penguins everywhere in all sorts of guises and disguises, if you want to call it, and it was just a quite incredible place to visit. The original plan had been to stay in South Georgia for an extra day or so, but that just became impossible because the weather changed very, very quickly, and so the decision was to head back to Stanley and maybe to spend a day or two in the Falklands. And I think I'll give the last word to the fur seals who had dominated our whole trip. Amazing. So now it's time to leave South Georgia to return to civilization, to return to a population of 3,000 as opposed to a population of 19 in South Georgia. I've had an absolutely amazing trip to South Georgia. I've loved every minute of it, but I have to also say that I'm looking forward to future adventures in store for me in the Falkland Islands, and also when I get from there with a 3,000 population to however millions of population in Argentina. I'm sure that both will be absolutely fantastic and amazing.